Hey Bob, I've been hearing a lot about banks foreclosing on homes, even though they have no legal claim on the property. Is that really possible?
Well, that's what I'm hearing.
Why are the banks allowed to housejack people in broad daylight?
Because when homeowners got a loan, the bank sold that loan to a trust, who in turn commingled it with a pool of other loans, and created a bond.
Are we in France?
No.
Germany?
No.
Good, then speak English.
What I meant was the mortgages were sold to Wall Street firms, who used them as collateral for a bond, known as a mortgage-backed security.
Go on.
And when a loan changes ownership, every link in the transaction must be verified.
And how does that happen?
The buyers of the loan must receive an assignment of the mortgage note from the seller. If the assignment is misplaced or lost, they can sign an affidavit to assert that all the papers are in good order.
So what's the problem?
Well, the loans were sliced and diced into so many mortgage-backed securities that a lot of the assignment notes were lost and nobody can prove that they own the loan.
What about the affidavits?
Like I said, the affidavits attest to the fact the papers are in good order, but only after a thorough review of the file. It turns out that a loan officer at a large bank testified that he signed up to 10,000 affidavits each month for 5 years.
That's the type of stamina I've been looking for. Is he single?
That's the problem. It's not humanly possible to review 10,000 files a month.
I wouldn't put it past my ex-husband.
Who couldn't keep a job.
That isn't why I married him.
Come to find out that many financial institutions were essentially robo-signing the affidavits in an effort to foreclose on homes
that they didn't own, because the mortgage didn't legally change hands, when Wall Street firms bought and sold the original loans half a dozen times.
Yes, but there's more.
Oh, I'm stunned.
State laws require the change of ownership to be recorded at the county courthouse to provide transparency, which also comes with a small recording fee.
Everyone has a hustle.
But the banks created a company called MERS, which stands for Mortgage Electronic Registration System, to electronically track the change of ownership.
When's the last time you used a typewriter?
I don't remember.
Exactly, because now we use computers. What's wrong with electronically tracking the change of ownership?
Because the large banks created the shell company that acts on behalf of buyers and sellers of a mortgage to privatize the public records, which then shielded the banks from paying the recording fees.
Some people are cheap, others will make a buffalo jump off a nickel.
But the state real estate laws prevent financial institutions from using the name of a shell company, in effect naming itself as the mortgagee.
Power to the people.
If it turns out that state laws were violated when the banks electronically track the change in ownership, or that the affidavits are invalid and the banks can't prove that they legally own the properties, then foreclosures would come to a halt, the banks would lose a big chunk of their capital, liquidity would dry up, and the crash of 2008 would look like a bull market.
And why all the doom and gloom, Mr. Sunshine?
Because MERS processed 60% of all outstanding mortgages, including $2 trillion of loans that have either gone bad or are likely to do so. And now the states are pissed that they lost out on $2.4 billion of recording fees.
You mean million?
No, the banks saved $2.4 billion by avoiding the state fees, and that's assuming the loans were only sold once. California alone is suing for $60 billion.
Why aren't people protesting in the streets? Did they run out of vacation time?
Because it's a complicated subject.
You just explained it to me in 3 minutes.
That's because you're well-read and can understand complex financial matters.
I work in a cubicle.
With a nice view. Besides, money is so emotional that Americans are either too angry to think straight or so worn out that they can't think at all.
So how will all this be resolved?
If the trustees of the mortgage-backed securities weren't properly assigned the notes, investors who bought these bonds can argue that the loans were ineligible to use as collateral for the mortgage-backed security,
causing even more losses when the banks have to buy back the depreciated bonds at the original price.
Which is why Congress will likely change the interpretation of the laws.
To what? Screwed?
No, they might retroactively legitimize electronic mortgage transfers, or cite the Interstate Commerce Clause to satisfy the guidelines.
There's no way the banks will get away with that.
Okay, you put your money on financially strapped homeowners who don't vote in large numbers, and can't afford a lawyer, and I'll bet on the lobbyists who spent $3.5 billion last year changing important pieces of legislation.
What about contract law?
The United States broke more than 400 contracts with the Native Americans. What's a few more?
And the homeowners, where do they stand?
They would still owe the money, but good luck getting them to pay it back if they know a foreclosure can't take place.
What happened to personal responsibility?
It was a passing fad in the 1980s that registered with a lot of hard-working Americans until they went broke.
Where did you get all of this valuable information?
I read Ivory Johnson's column on Examiner.com.
On what?
It's Examiner.com for Washington, D.C., written by Ivory Johnson in the news section. He discusses everything from the European debt crisis to the role hedge funds play in commodity prices.
I see a link to his columns in the description of this video. Is he a highly educated overachiever?
No, he dropped out of high school and now spends his time making silly cartoons.